Hi, this is Angela. Welcome to Shakti Stories. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Shakti Stories. I'm so excited to have with us Blaire Lindsay. She's with us today because she's a feminine embodiment coach who helps women to go from doubting themselves to feeling confident and sexy. In her online programs and in-person trainings, Blaire draws from a background in classical and neo-tantra yoga, dance, and trauma resolution to help women access full body presence and inner and outer radiance. She's the founder of the Embodied Feminine Power Coaching Certification, where healers, teachers, and coaches learn to amplify their feminine power and create profitable and sustainable coaching practices. Blaire holds a BA in social sciences, is a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a certified coach, and a somatic experiencing trauma resolution practitioner in training. So, hello, Blaire.
Hey, Angela.
Welcome.
Be here.
Welcome to Shakti Stories. I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I know that you specialize in this area around the feminine. So, when I saw you initially on the summit around the shadow side of the feminine, I just really wanted to have you on and hear a little bit more about, to start, what the feminine is for you.
Mm, that's so good. You mentioned the summit, the shadow side of the feminine, and in every single interview, I asked our experts, what is the feminine for you? So I
Oh,
got like 30 different perspectives, and none were the same. It was really interesting. There were common threads, but none were the same. And I love having the opportunity to feel into it for myself. Um, the short answer is that word, that definition is always evolving. It's always changing for me.
yeah.
So it's complex and it's nuanced and it's only becoming more nuanced for me as time goes on. However, I see the feminine as the capacities and the energies and even the natural tendencies within each person, each thing, everything in the universe that is the yin.
Yeah.
That is the yielding. That is the feeling rather than the doing, the being rather than the doing, the presence rather than the productivity.
Mm,
It's this thing that we're not very, and I found this out a lot in the summit, is that we're not so educated around the feminine. Like there's a lot to learn. There's so much to learn because our world is so masculine orientated.
yeah.
So I know that's kind of a vague, I know I'm kind of skirting around the answer, but in essence, it's like the creative mechanism of the universe.
Mm,
It's what births all things.
love that.
It's our ability to feel and be in our bodies.
Yeah.
It's our capacity to have values like compassion, sensitivity, tolerance, um, fierceness also, because the feminine is also fierce and
Mhm.
loving in her fierceness and sometimes scary in her fierceness. Like she's fucking complex.
Yeah.
I don't mean to swear on this, but
It's
it's
okay.
like the more down the rabbit hole I journey, the more I'm like, wow, this is just a thread that keeps unraveling,
Yeah.
but that like through seeking it out fills me so much and gives me so much through the exploration of it.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love everything you just said. And even when you said you were circling around it, it's like, in a way, that is so the feminine. It's like, it's not about this linear definition of just, yeah.
Yeah, and like our minds are so conditioned, and our brains even, to like, hear the words and then cognitively translate that into something, when the feminine is so much embodiment. Like, what do you feel when I'm saying this?
Yes.
What's happening in your body?
Yeah.
What
Feel
what's
it.
your
Yeah.
experience exactly, which is this rather non-linear and in some ways non-cognitive experience.
Yeah. I totally love that. I do feel, as you're speaking, I feel alive. Like I feel energized and it's like tingling. And it's, yeah,
Mm.
it's like, yes, this is the, yeah, this is the very center of my passion. And it's like, I think for so many people, it's actually like something that just, yeah, makes you feel more alive and makes you feel more valued as a woman. And so it's like, okay, so I'm super curious as you started to become more aware of the feminine. How did things start to change in your life?
Mm, that's such a great question. Um, so I think this story helps illuminate the kind of journey and even the processes of meeting the feminine. I first was introduced to this idea of the feminine through Tantra and through a Tantra community that was really like, this is the feminine. The feminine is like the receptive and the soft, and
Yeah.
and although I got a lot out of that definition of it, I felt right away, okay, this is pretty limiting.
Yeah.
This isn't the whole story. Like, this is somehow like a weird reversal back to like 1950s gender roles,
Yeah.
right? So
Totally.
that was like my first introduction to it,
Yeah.
which was like, yeah, get into your sensuality and like, this is the feminine. But as my journey progressed and I started to move more into feminine psychology and especially Jungian psychology, learning about archetypes, um, that's when I really realized the feminine to be so much more than like, oh, I have to be um, soft for my partner to be attracted to me, which was kind of how it was framed
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that. It's,
in simple terms. And I'm not even like trash talking
yeah.
that system, because I did get a lot out of it. But
Yeah.
as I experienced more of the feminine, I realized how, for me, it's such an embodied experience.
Yeah.
Like, the feminine for me is like, what is most true for me in this moment?
Yeah.
And can I yield to that
Yeah.
and let that come through?
Mm.
If it's sensual and like connecting to my body in that way, if it's feeling angry and getting upset even, or feeling frustrated with something, allowing that to move through also feels like an authentic leaning into my feminine.
Yes.
It's really like, the word that just came to mind is listening.
Yeah.
I feel most connected to the feminine, and I think what's changed my life most has been just listening, like, what is true for me right now?
Yeah.
And if something doesn't feel true, it's like, oh, maybe there's some programming around that. Maybe there's some habitual patterns. Maybe there's some trauma there.
Yeah.
But then feeling the resonance of like, oh, this feels authentic. This feels like me. This feels like something that does give me life and makes me feel energized
Yeah.
and makes me feel complete and more whole. That's what my experience is, becoming more and more of the feminine.
I love that. That's yeah, that's such a beautiful, like, multi-layered answer. It's like it's not even just, I mean, there's one thing to say that every, as you were saying originally, every definition from every person is different, but that's even more to say, that adds even more to say that it's about being embodied. So it's moment by moment, it's changing day by day. It depends on our experience of what's, yeah, what we're coming into contact with and how our hearts and bodies and minds are making sense of that.
Mm, yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I think this is going to be so helpful for some of the people I work with, because working as a clinical counselor, I have a lot of people who come in with, identifying that they have anxiety or depression. And so they're coming in with sort of a desire for a solution and almost wanting to be, like, they want to identify what's wrong with me, basically. Right. And so yeah, it's such an unlearning even around that paradigm of, making sense of what's wrong, rather than like, it's it's so different to actually like follow the energy into what's true.
Mm,
Yeah, like what's alive, what's in our body, or what's not alive, as you say. If there's some trauma there, then sometimes it's getting to know that block, getting to kind of sit beside that and come into contact and dialogue with what's there.
mm,
And so yeah, I just love this. So you spoke about the tantric background, and I know that, as you said, there can be in many ways of that, taking shape. It can be limited in seeing, yeah, like emphasizing the yin and emphasizing the receiving, which can certainly be a real training for all of us, as you said, but also that you started to become more aware of other elements. Tell me a little bit more about that, like, the fierce feminine or the dark feminine. How, yeah, how has that, the light side of that, how has it really showed up?
yeah. Yeah. There is such depth to the feminine.
Yeah.
There really is so much depth. And something that really helped me when I was conceiving of the fierce feminine, let's say, because a lot of the literature is like, the masculine is the yang and the feminine is the yin, um, and that's one level, like that's true, it
Yeah.
is true. But I was having all these experiences that were like, yeah, but I'm fucking enraged right now about what's going on the planet, and like I am enraged about the destruction that I see and the pollution that I see. Like, is that not okay? Is that not feminine? Like, were these thoughts that I was having. And what really helped me was understanding, um, that there is, within the yin, there's also a yang component.
Mm.
Just as in the yang, there's also a yin component.
Yeah.
So if
Okay.
you look at the body, and I found this to be the best metaphor,
Yeah.
if you look at the body, if you look at the womb, there is this aspect of the womb that is receptive, right? We take in whatever, a penis or sperm. Um, it's an open space.
Mm.
But then in the process of pregnancy, and I don't know if you're a mom, I'm not a mom either, but for some reason this metaphor like really clicked for me.
Yeah.
Learning about birth and the process of birthing, there's this exegetive force outward that pushes,
Right.
that releases, that pushes out. And we can consider that and as it was relayed to me, this is the yang within the yin. Like, we don't just receive, there's also a time to mobilize and to push and to, um, birth that thing, whatever it is,
Yeah.
stand up, like get to the heart of what the power that we have and push it through and push it out.
Mm. Yeah.
Just as in a man, there's this, the yang penis, is like what you see, but
Yeah.
there's also the testes, which are the yin aspect of the masculine, this place which is delicate and soft and needs to be protected and also necessary for life.
Right.
Right? So there's like deeper layers of these definitions, and I found that metaphor of the body to be super helpful.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. That I hadn't heard that before, really described that way.
Yeah. As I understand it, like from my limited perspective, the dark feminine, anything that's in the dark is like what we don't see or what we can't see, what we are not taught to see, what is uncomfortable to see.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much within the feminine experience
Yeah.
for men and for women, actually, like so much that's been pushed down, relegated to the shadows, so much of our feeling experience,
Yeah.
so much of our sensitivity,
Yeah.
so much of our trauma, even.
Yeah.
So many of our stories have been relegated to the shadows. And so I suppose for me, the dark feminine is this symbol of reclaiming those parts of the feminine
Yeah.
and bringing them back into our experience so that they're not separate,
Yeah.
so that we are more integrated and more whole.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful journey, and it's, yeah, it is a journey. It does kind of take time. It is a process. And I find like, yeah, you kind of spiral around it. It's like certain things where I'm like, oh, I feel like I've looked at all this stuff, say in the sexuality realm. It's like, okay, I've looked at the past partners and I feel like I've done all this work and like sorted it all. And then it's like, even a year later is almost a cycle. And I'll be like, what? Again, the past partner comes up in a dream or something where it's like, it's coming up again.
As you say that, the thing that comes to mind is like turning towards it,
Yeah.
right? You can turn towards the things that are in the shadows,
Yeah.
the dark feminine.
Yeah.
Just hold a light there, because, and that's, I say just hold a light there. That's actually really courageous
Yeah.
and brave
Yeah.
to just hold a light and look what might be there.
Yeah.
And that process, as you said, day to day, just I'm going to turn towards it rather than away from it.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful
Yes.
practice.
Yes. Oh, I just love the work that you're doing and the the way that you yeah, the frame that you hold in doing this work. It really inspires me.
Mm.
And I was thinking too about how, yeah, I think I mentioned this to you a little bit before we got on the call, but just like I notice how to me these themes are very deep and very meaningful. But I did notice in myself when the world situation started happening, the crisis started happening, I was like, oh, I shouldn't talk on my Instagram or like my in my counseling sessions, should I be speaking about the feminine and about, should I mention pleasure? Should that be allowed right now? Because it feels like it's, some part of me is like, okay, I need to be really practical. And, and I'm just like curious what you'd have to say about these times that we're in right now, these wild times. Like, how do you see the feminine showing up? And yeah, how do you understand it as a call for what we should be paying attention to right now?
Totally. Well, as you're saying that, I'm just feeling this like fireball come through me, and I'm like, don't stop talking about pleasure.
I saw something there happen and I'm like, oh,
Because this is like,
good to say.
oh, because this is so the medicine of the feminine.
Yeah.
And this is one of the wounds of our society, a patriarchal society,
Yeah.
is that we don't see we're really screwed up around pleasure.
Yeah.
Like, even that word has so many different connotations for so many people. Yeah, we don't honor and see the value of pleasure.
Yeah.
in the capacity that I think it truly has.
Yeah.
Right? So we, like, one misconception is like, oh, pleasure is, the guilty pleasures,
Yeah.
like stealing a bite of chocolate, or, I don't know, um, my favorite Netflix show or something.
Right.
And that's one aspect of it, but it's also like, we don't know how to turn towards what feels truly good.
Mm.
This is an aspect of patriarchy that I can really see in myself, is that one thing the feminine and learning about the feminine did is, and being in touch with my body, it taught me to recognize what actually feels deeply restorative, regeneratively good,
Yeah. I love that.
right?
Yeah.
Not just like some 5 minute like masturbation or like eating a bar of chocolate,
Yeah, exactly.
but like, what actually do I feel better afterwards for doing? What allows me to do the things what makes it easier
Yeah.
long term, right? As I'm going through my day, what is replenishing me to do the things that I have to do?
Yes.
And when we're in a situation like we're in now, when stress chemicals and stress hormones are flooding our systems,
Yeah.
we're waking up and we're checking the news and we're seeing what's wrong, and we're going to bed and worried about what's happening. Pleasure and feeling good is a reprieve for our whole system that
Yes.
allows us to function and manage much, much better than we
Mm.
would without it.
I love that. I love that. I love your point that, yeah, it's not just about, putting Epsom salts in your bath or like, yeah, having that chocolate ice cream or whatever. It's actually
Which,
like,
by the way, is also important.
yeah, which is,
I'm not knocking that. I love all those things. And sometimes they are deeply regenerative.
yeah,
But, oh, that was like the best thing I could have done in the moment.
yeah,
But also, like, personally, like, I know having 4 glasses of wine is actually the next day going to be really intense on my system, not long-term restorative on my system.
yes. Oh, yeah. I love that. I used to think that I was relaxing when I did like, I still, yeah, I love my baths. I love Epsom salts and lavender baths. But it's like, there was a point where I really thought like, yeah, I'm relaxing, but really I bring in my book and I'm like, still, or I'm like writing notes and then I'm like in there for only 10 minutes. And then, then same thing with Netflix. It's like, yeah, I'll just watch Netflix because it's relaxing. But I took a restorative yoga training a few years ago, and that really shifted me even more to going, oh my gosh, do I ever completely relax? Like, do I ever truly reset?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love what you're saying here of like that deeper level of actually um, the, the integration of being in a state that allows for um, for all of it,
Mm.
like, including the deep rest. Mm, that's beautiful.
And the other thing that came to mind for me too was that in my um, learning about trauma and my journey of becoming a trauma therapist, what was most surprising, and also not surprising, but maybe surprising to see the science of it,
Yeah.
is that walking someone through the process in this particular system I'm trained in, we don't heal trauma by going into this
Yeah.
heart of it,
Yeah.
like talking about it and breaking it apart and making sense of it and you know focusing on it. We heal it by teaching ourselves that we have the capacity to deal with it,
Yes.
that we are strong,
Yeah.
that, and in somatic experiencing we call them resources.
Yeah.
So it's like you actually heal and digest trauma by leaning into what is working
Yes.
and what feels good and what makes you feel powerful and what reminds you of your strength,
I love it.
right? Which
Yeah.
is like in many times what feels really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in
We have
that sense,
to learn
pleasure,
that.
it's healing.
Yes.
It's 100% healing.
I so agree. I so agree. And the style I do is called focusing, and it's very similar to somatic experiencing. I've done some trainings with somatic experiencing online, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like they fit together so beautifully. And so like I love that because it's really yeah, you don't have to go. Like people sometimes are afraid when they're calling in for therapy because they think, oh gosh, you know, this is gonna be so heavy. I'm gonna be like crying for hours and, you know, for months, or they just don't really know what to expect, right? And it's like, well, you might, you know, there may be some movement of pain and sadness. And so there might be, you know, I can't say you're gonna leave every session like feeling usually you do leave feeling a bit lighter, but you know what I mean. You don't necessarily. It's not it's not always easy, but it's like it's like it's allowed to feel good too. There's so much room, and it's important, as you're saying. There's so much room for those good feelings, those the life forward energy.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And reflecting back what you're saying and, feeling like the similarities in our work, a big part of that work is teaching, teaching and reteaching the the inner strength and like how good, like how good it is possible to feel actually,
Yes.
right? Like people think, oh, I'm just supposed to know how to feel good, I'm just supposed to know how to like do these things, and
Mm-hmm.
then we have issues, we beat ourselves up over having issues, but it's like, yeah, but nobody ever trained us or taught us in resilience, or
Yeah.
taught us in managing these things, or taught us about the strength that we have as human beings.
Yes.
So in many ways, I think, I mean, therapy has been such an essential part of my journey
Yeah.
because it just taught me these things that I'm like, why doesn't everybody know this?
Yeah, for sure.
Like we would be so much more functional and more equipped and, better able to handle what's going on in the world if we knew how to do this.
Yes. Well, I love that. I love what you say. And when you brought up resilience there, it just made me think of Thomas Hubel saying that we all had ancestors who went through so many different things and, you know, and their resilience, like the fact that they, you know, survived all of that um, and yeah, and kept obviously conceiving because we're here. And so they kept, you know, finding those places of wellness. So we all have well ancestors. And I just loved that point because it's like, oh yeah, I mean, sometimes it feels like things are, you know, going, it's hard to know with what's going on in the world, like what direction things are going in. And that can be really scattering and overwhelming.
100%.
Yeah. So I love your point there. It feels like you have this, I'm picturing you have kind of like this compass and you're like, you just feel like, to me, it feels like you've got this clarity around like pleasure is going to um, be a guide and the wisdom of my body is going to guide me.
Mm, yeah, and for you, speaking into this feeling of like, oh, I can't share about this right now. We need people to be sharing about this right now because
Exactly.
that's the way forward.
Right.
If pleasure is how we build resilience,
Yeah.
and pleasure is how we teach ourselves that it's safe to feel,
Yes.
that's the world that I want to be creating. And that's the world that's possible.
Yes.
And I think, even speaking into um, this fear of not showing up and not wanting to ruffle feathers in a sense right now, which I totally get.
Yeah.
Um, I've had many moments with myself too, where it's like, what's important to share,
Yeah.
what's actually going to be helpful right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking into that, like, we have so much opportunity in the breakdown. There has been in my life so many breakdowns that became breakthroughs. And not just in like a cliche, like, oh yeah, it's breakdown to breakthrough. It's like shit sometimes needs to fall apart.
Yes.
And that's when potential completely opens up.
Yeah.
And if we can reorient ourselves within what's happening in the world right now,
Yeah.
so while things are breaking down, if we can reorient to the things that are more true and more beautiful and more embodied, and that's what we get to create.
I love that. Oh, I almost want to like almost tearing up. It's like, yes, I needed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need your message. Your people need your message. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, since everything, the whole, situation has been happening over the last couple of months. And I mean, I'm on Vancouver Island in BC, Canada. So there's not a lot of people I know that have actually, gotten sick or lost family, or I haven't had that even in my client sessions. But still, there's this tension that everyone is holding, and a lot of the time. And I'm finding that um, it's that I can go in and out of that. I can go into a state where I'm just like, it's wild. It's almost like I find I'm actually like bouncing from like both sides too, because there's times where I'm just feeling so inspired, like in this moment, in this conversation, I'm like, oh, everything's making so much sense. Like I've never felt so on track. And then there's other moments where I'm like, ooh, like, what am I doing? Just questioning around everything, where I'm living, and, what I'm offering to the world. It's like everything suddenly goes into this unknown, uncertainty place.
Totally.
And at times that can be scary. And so I'm just thinking about how I want to ask you something else, because a lot of my clients, what they're calling in about right now, they're not some, there's been some health anxiety, but more so I find what people are calling in about is I think people are really questioning anything in their life right now that's like anything that they were already like looking at a little bit, they're right now it seems to be amplified, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, say they're having relationship difficulties. Like I noticed a lot of my clients are not having sex, not necessarily wanting to have sex, or they're afraid that their partner's not attracted to them anymore. And this could be for a whole bunch of reasons. A lot of them are spending more time with the partner than ever, and they're socially isolating together, so they're on each other's nerves, and and there's all that. And then there's just the anxiety of what's happening, and yeah, so much. So what I wanted to ask you was, when people are finding themselves in these situations where sexuality, for example, maybe does seem so far away, like that kind of pleasure might seem so far. um, do you have any suggestions for how they might just either meet themselves in that place, or um, what you think might be what's being invited, do you think, at this time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to speak into what you're saying about our experiences being magnified right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's so true. With the circumstances we're living in right now, all of the things, the little traumas, the micro and the macro traumas that we were living with before,
Yeah.
are now amplified by what we're living. So the things before that we could kind of push past, we could glaze over, we could avoid, we're not able to do that anymore, because we're having to sit and be with ourselves or our partners.
Yeah.
So there's all these things popping up, things that we thought weren't big deals are all of a sudden becoming a big deal. And I think that it's not going to feel like a gift in the moment. It's going to feel like, oh, this really sucks. But there's an opportunity there.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opportunity to look like at what is coming up and to reimagine or recreate a different narrative. Right?
Mm.
So it's a really good time to pull out all the tools and
Right.
not see the fact that things coming up as a bad thing, but rather, okay, wow, this is coming up so that I can clear this right now.
Yeah.
I haven't had the time and the space to clear this before.
Yeah.
So it's kind of great that I have this opportunity and people like you or people like me who are online helping people process these things. Um, and then within those traumas, and then we're like, oh, now I don't want to have sex with my partner.
Yeah.
The thing I wanted to say, or that I want to say, is that we can't force ourselves to feel any certain way, right?
Yes.
We can't like put a layer of something different on top. Like, oh, there's this feeling of ickiness, but let me just like find a way to feel temporarily good about it.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of ignoring what's there. And I don't think it's ever a good idea to try and force ourselves to feel anything that isn't isn't real for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like if you're not feeling sexual, honor that you're not feeling sexual. Honor that completely. Honor that like you're kind of grossed out by your husband right now, or like you're just like feel like I haven't gotten out of my pajamas in 10 days. Like, of course I don't feel sexual. Like,
Yeah.
honor that that's how you feel.
Yes.
And then work to processing that feeling to see what comes next. So
Yes.
when you process that, like, oh, I don't feel sexual, and it feels this way in my body, or it brings up this story, or it makes me feel rejected, or it, brings up this thing. Can you process what's coming up in the moment and then be available to what comes after that, which
Mm.
may be a feeling of genuine curiosity or like, wow, I'm 5% more open than I was before,
Yeah.
right? But it's a matter of being with what's present, processing, digesting it, and allowing what comes next. And even maybe having a strong intention, like, I'm processing this so that maybe I can find that desirability or that attraction or that turn on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are really good embodiment practices. Like, if I think turn on is medicine in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So if we've honored that, like, okay, that's not where I'm at right now, but I still am willing to um, put on my favorite sexy song and just see what happens.
Yes. I love that.
Right? Like maybe it stirs something authentic. Maybe I'm like, nope, this isn't the time. Don't want to do this. But there are practices that can stir that kind of energetic aliveness and flow in our bodies. And they don't have to be difficult. It can be like, put yourself in your room, close your eyes, put on a sexy song, move your hips,
Yeah.
hump the bed, whatever. What happens,
Yeah.
right? What happens? What
Yeah.
comes next when you're just really present to what is alive for you in that moment?
I love that. Yeah, I think you just said it so well because I notice I think a lot of people are feeling guilt or they're feeling ahead of like, they're looking forward and going, oh no, what if like all year we're not going to have sex? Or what if, yeah, as you were saying, like, what if I'm going to be like unattractive to them if this goes on for any longer? But it's like, okay, wait a second, that's getting way ahead of yourself. Like if you're just in this moment, that's it's just like it's totally a different way to be with it. It's just like, okay, in this moment, what do I need right now? And yeah, can I meet that place, but be a little bit, as you said, like just open to seeing what happens as we dance or as we move or as we just turn in. I love that. Oh, you're so good.
And what you say about the story is really important too. Like
Yeah.
when it's like projecting into, oh, but if this is now, oh my God, how is it going to be in 6 months?
Yeah.
That's happening up here.
Yeah.
And desire and sexuality and life force, it all happens below the neck in some ways, right? Like we can get turned on through our thoughts as well, but like those stories are not helpful. What's helpful is tuning into the body and um, being present to what's alive there. Your
Yes.
attention to what's alive in the body,
Mm.
empowering that rather than empowering the story.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Ah, okay. I have now you got me with one more question. I'm like, I have another one because it's just like it's so good. Another thing I'm thinking about is I think when a lot of people are feeling a lot of that tension or feeling fear right now, and of course it's totally understandable for people to be feeling fear, but what I find people seem to be pointing at is that that's it's kind of like the fear is contagious, like it's not necessarily theirs, but that they talk to someone or they see something on the news and then they feel this like total contraction, and worry. And so I'm just thinking about boundaries and when it comes to keeping yourself clear and staying in your own energy, like, yeah, do you just have any suggestions around that? It may be exactly what you were speaking to already, but what comes to mind for you?
Mm. Oh, that's a good question. Um, so I want to just say that boundaries have been a teacher for me for a long time. I'm not somebody who's just naturally good at putting up boundaries. My tendency is much more to merge with people and like how can I help you and how can I make you feel better and how I'm a natural peacekeeper. So for better or worse, right? And I imagine that some of the women tuning in to this podcast are as well. So boundaries and taking care of our energetic hygiene as empaths and as sensitive women and as women who actually want to create good
Yeah.
and not contribute to the fear or the you know emotions that we know aren't helpful.
Yeah.
If we want to be women who are making a difference, we have to be well boundaried.
Yeah.
And I see it as energetic hygiene.
Yeah. Love that.
What is helping me to be more resilient? What's helping me to feel more alive? What's helping me to not collapse in despair?
Yeah.
Because if I'm reading all the news and I'm learning about every little thing that's happening,
Yeah.
uh, personally, with my temperament and nervous system, that's like, okay, now I can't move for the day. Like I'm depressed, the world sucks, like
Yeah.
don't want to do anything. And I'm not good to anybody like that,
Yes.
including myself.
Yeah.
Like that's not a fun place for me to be, and it's not a place where I feel like I'm contributing.
Yeah.
So to me, boundaries mean being really discerning about what you let into your space.
Yes. Mm.
What information are you taking in, and how is it making you feel?
Yeah.
Are you taking it in because it's a program and you're like, well, I need to be informed and I need to stay up to date?
Yeah.
Um, or is it something that is making you feel, oh, okay, there may be a lot of shit happening right now, but I can still trust myself in this moment to do the next right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that like pandemic or no pandemic, there's so much information, there's so much stimulus, and comparison is a big one, right? Like this is where boundaries have come up for me a lot, is like, is it helpful for me to look at that person and go like, oh my God, she's so beautiful and she's so smart and I'm a piece of shit. Like if that's the programming, that's not healthy programming. But if that's what I notice is happening all of the time, maybe I should unfollow that person for a while until I feel really good in myself. Enough to be like, okay, I appreciate what that person is putting out. So how is what we are imbibing and ingesting, how is it making us feel? I think it's really important to notice. And then if something is not aligned with the vision, like our deepest vision that we have for ourselves and the way we need to show up for that vision to manifest, then it might be wise in that moment to just say like, I'm not available for that right now. I read an amazing book a couple of weeks ago. Maybe you've read it. It's called Untamed.
Oh my gosh, I haven't read it, but my women's circle is going to read it next.
It's so
cool.
good. It's so good.
I love that came up. That's cool.
Yeah,
Again,
and I
think about it.
I love within that book, there's this theme of permission, and like when women do what's best for them, everybody benefits. We've been taught that like it's selfish, it's wrong to do what we want, it's wrong to feel good. But when we do what we want, when we allow our deepest desires to come through, when we take care of ourselves, everybody benefits.
I love that.
And there's this analogy that the author uses, because she was like a Christian mom blogger for years, and then she came out being in love with a woman. Spoiler alert. Not so much.
No more.
It's a part of it. And she had this analogy of when she came out to her parents, it was really difficult for her. And they just flooded her with fear. Well, what's going to happen to the kids? And this is really going to hurt them. And what's this going to do to your career and your reputation? And she used this analogy or metaphor of a drawbridge. So she's on her island or her castle, and there's this drawbridge where she decides who gets to come in to her space.
I love that.
And at a certain point, she had to say to her mother, which she said was really difficult, which you can imagine, she has a great relationship with her mother. You're actually not allowed in this space if you're going to bring that fear and that negativity.
Wow.
That's where the drawbridge comes up.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, and it's like we get to do that with everything.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't want that negativity, or I don't want that fear, and I'm allowed to say that, and I'm allowed to cultivate what feels good and right for me.
Yes.
And that doesn't make me a bad person or an uncompassionate person or whatever.
That is true. So true. Wow. Yeah, that really hits home right now. I have an interesting landlady situation, which I won't get into all the details, but I just feel like we could talk forever. So I'm just like, oh, I never want to stop. Is there anything else that you just feel like called to share today? Does anything else feel like it's bubbling up, or?
What's alive for me right now goes back to what we were saying about the creative or the possibilities after breakdown. So you said I don't know if I can speak about the feminine. I don't know if I can speak about pleasure right now.
Yeah.
I really see this moment in history through my own lens
Yeah.
as the feminine.
Mm.
Uncertainty, mystery, things dissolving back into the soil,
Right.
back into the fertile void so that something more beautiful, something new can be born. That is the feminine.
Mm.
And it's, the dark feminine is this scary place where things are dying
Yeah.
and the soil is dark
Yeah.
and we might not know what's coming, but we have this opportunity to plant seeds right now
Mm. Yeah.
and to gestate and hold what's in our hearts, like what is more true and more beautiful for us.
Mm. Yeah.
And aligning with that, aligning with the things that feel important and feel true for you, for everybody listening, for me, I
Yeah.
feel that that's some of the most important work we can be doing right now.
Yeah.
It's really focusing on what we're building and not avoiding the breakdown at
Right.
all,
Yeah.
but also taking this as an opportunity and maybe seeing it as an opportunity to birth something new.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's my vision, is like, wow, what is going to come next after this?
Yes. Oh,
And if we're anchored in our hearts and we've spent months at home digesting our trauma, if we have that luxury, a lot of people don't, I
yeah.
realize, but if we can do that, what will we be able to create in that fertile void?
Mm. Yeah. Wow.
And we need women right now. We
Yeah.
need women. We need sensitive, empathic, heart-centered, beauty-minded, imperfect women to just show up as themselves right now.
Mm. Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Mm.
Mm, thank you so much. I
Yeah.
just, like I said, I just want to keep talking, but yeah, you just said that so well. I think that's a nice place to end. And so thank you again. And yeah, I wish you so much joy and time to process in this time. And yeah, I hope that you'll maybe visit us on Shakti Stories again.
I'd love to. Thanks so much for having me, Angela.
Thank you, Blaire.